So that's the plan. Because I won't be on tomorrow. So, all right. So Micah is our new judge. So now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." Okay, wait a minute. Did he steal it or did he get it returned? Not quite clear. Said, "I have it, the silver. I took it." So he stole the silver. His mom put a curse on it. He confronts her, and she says, "The Lord bless you, my son." I hope I'm reading that right. That sounds weird. When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave it to a silversmith, who used them to make an idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Okay, so he steals the silver, he returns it, then she swears to God to make an idol with it. This is just craziness. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he had an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. That's an interesting phrase. I think we've seen it a few times. However, what's interesting is I don't know that has anything to do with a king. Everyone doing what they saw fit. Okay, you can do that with or without a king. So, a young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Try to do that every time. It'll be more consistent and I think funnier that way too. So we are in Judges. We're going to finish up this book today. So we started here in 17. Really, really bizarre story. So this guy steals silver, 1,100 shekels, from his mom. She puts a curse on it. He says, "I heard you put a curse on it, Mom." So he returns it. When he returns the silver, she says, "Oh, bless you, son." What? And then she says, I'm gonna give this money to a silversmith. I'm gonna dedicate it to the Lord to make an idol." It's like, what? So he makes an idol, and he has a shrine in his house and an ephod with the idol set up, and now we have a Levite that just happens to come to his town looking for a place to stay. That's where we picked up the story. So, bizarre story for sure. So, then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since the Levite has become my priest." Weird. Yeah, it's in the Bible for a reason. And that's how the story ends. And I'm not sure if that means he stopped following the idols because the priest was there and now he's serving the true God. I am confused here. And I don't remember the story. I mean, I can remember the idol piece and the Levite coming, but I don't remember the details, is what I want to say. I don't remember the details well enough to go, what's going on here? This is one I would definitely need to go read some commentaries on and what other people have thought it meant throughout the centuries. So, all right, that was, I guess, a good way to start out our reading for today. That will not be on probably any Bible trivia questions that you will ever see. So, if you want to stump your friends, that would be a good one to get to. The Quiz King, I think he came back up later in Judges. Okay. That may be true. We'll pay attention to see if Micah comes up again. Oh, okay. Now, yep, I see down here it says in verse 4 now he told Micah what. Okay, so maybe we're not done with him. Yeah, I thought it ended up badly. That's why I was surprised it ended here. But see, this is where a chapter verse was getting me to think in another title saying uh, the Danites, that it was over. But I guess it's not. So it says, in those days, Israel had no king. Again, emphasizing that. Again, there's no king. There's no king. This is all prior to kings being in Israel. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites set 5 of their leading men from Zoar and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, "Go explore the land." So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Oh, he's back already. Where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned in there and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them that Micah had done for him and said, "He has hired me. I am his priest." Then they said to him, "Please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful." The priest answered them, "Go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval." So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonites and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zoar and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, "How did you find things?" Okay. They answered, "Come on, let's attack. We have seen the land, and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take over. When you go there, you will find an unsuspecting people and a spacious land that God has put into your hands, a land that lacks nothing whatever." Then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zoar and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. This is why the place west of Kiriath Jearim is called Mahanadan to this day. Dan's camp. Okay. From there they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol and the ephod and the household gods, the priest said to him, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet. Don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and a clan in Israel as priest rather than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idols and went along with the people. Putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted at them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you called out your men to fight?" He replied, "You took the gods I made and my priest and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask what's the matter with you?" Pretty obvious. I agree with him. The Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. Then they took what Micah had made and his priest and went on to Laish against a people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their cities. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in the valley near Beth Rehob. yeah, well, don't argue with us. We'll kick your butts. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan, after their ancestor Dan, who was born in Israel, though the city used to be called Laish. There the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests from the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. They continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. This is just weird. Yeah, bullies. They came and took stuff, stole it, and then they went and conquered a bunch of other people. So I guess he's a little better off that he didn't get killed, but weird. They steal the idol and set the idol up. Okay. These are not the most common stories in the book of Judges, to say the least. It's not Deborah, it's not Gideon, it's not Samson, so it's not Ehud. Ehud happens to be my favorite, so. All right, in those days, Israel had no king. Again, repeating that as we start a new section. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day they got up early and prepared to leave, but the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, saying, so he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he arose to go, the woman's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. This guy either has a thing for eating, or his son-in-law does, that he keeps being able to persuade him to stay to eat. Not sure. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave his father-in-law, the woman's father said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, and his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. Yeah, somebody's maybe a good cook. Maybe that's it. I can be convinced a visitor stay anywhere with food. Hey, Losty 815, thanks for being in here. Hope you enjoy. We're going through the book of Judges, and yeah, food is a persuasive argument for lots of people. Hey, Warrior of Light, thanks for the alert, friend. His master replied, "No, we won't go into the city." Oh wait, I missed a spot. I missed a spot. I scrolled up and then lost my place. When they were near Jabus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into the city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." He added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. Okay, so this would have been a hospitality thing. You would take strangers into your house to stay. This would be the courteous thing to do. It'd be the appropriate thing to do. It'd be the expected cultural norm to welcome strangers in. And we've got lots of stories we've seen in Scripture as we've been going through already where people invited strangers into their house. So it's not a weird thing in this day and time. Maybe in ours, in our culture, but not them. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. Then he looked and saw the traveler in the city square. The old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way to Bethlehem in Judah, to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything, so we just need a place to stay. We've got everything we need." "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need, only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. Again, this is a cultural thing, but an important thing. Demonstration of welcomeness and bringing someone into your home, you wash their feet. They've been on a long journey. Their feet are dusty. This is a great practice to show hospitality. It's a full welcoming was what they're doing here. It's also usually the job of the lowliest servant because, well, the roads were traveled by animals as well as people. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." This sounds a whole lot like Sodom and Gomorrah, when Lot brought the visitors into his house and showed them hospitality. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since the man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." Again, same kind of solution is proposed. Here's my daughter, and here's his concubine. But the men did not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them. And they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. At daybreak the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been done, or done not since the day of the Israelites came up out of Egypt." Just imagine. We must do something, so speak up. It's a horrible story. Just Horrible story. I'll just say that. Then all Israel from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their place in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 men armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, "I and my concubine came to Gilead in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gilead came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she is dead. I took my concubine and cut her into pieces and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do." All the men rose up together as one, saying, "None of us will go home. No, not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we'll do to Gibeah. We'll go up against it in the order decided by casting lots. We'll take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000, to get provisions for the army. Then, when the army arrives at Gibeah in Benjamin, it can give them what they deserve for this outrageous act done in Israel." So all the Israelites got together and united as one against the city. So a little bit different outcome than Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed by fire and brimstone, but they are going to take care of it. The tribes of Israel sent messengers throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What about this awful crime that was committed among you? Now turn these wicked men of Gibeah over to us, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. This is a fascinating stat here. So they have 700. So there's a select group of warriors who are all left-handed. There's 700 of them, and they're so good with a sling and a stone that they can hit a hair. So I'm thinking they mean hair on the head. So you set it up over there, they're that accurate. They are dead, spot-on, accurate, left-handed slingers. So they cast slings, or use their slings, cast stones, and 100% accurate. They will not miss. They can do that. And notice where they're from. They're from Benjamin. Interesting. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel. Remember, we were reading about Bethel, which is house of God, and that's where Jacob had the dream of the angels ascending and descending, and inquired of God. They said, "Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Benjamites?" The Lord replied, "Judah shall go first." Now, it's reading here as a voice answer. That may not actually be the intent here. I'm trying to remember where it is. And I know in Leviticus it talks about the ephod and there being two things with the ephod. And then there's also some description of casting. I remember earlier it said they were going to cast lots. So they're asking the question, and they cast the lots. And there's a couple of things that are mentioned. And like I said, when we get to Leviticus, we'll spend some more time perhaps exploring that. But they would cast those, and we're not sure what they looked like, but there would be different sides, and it would indicate something specific. So they cast the lots. It turns to Judah. The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went out to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another and again took up their positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening. And they inquired of the Lord. They said, "Shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamins, our fellow Israelites?" The Lord answered, "Go up against them." So I like this. They're inquiring of the Lord. They're trying to find out who and if they should do things. Then the Israelites drew near Benjamin the second day. This time, when the Benjamins came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with the sword. Then all the Israelites, the whole army, went up to Bethel, and there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. Excuse me. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the ark of the covenant of God was there, with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministering before it. They asked, "Shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not?" The Lord responded, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." Okay, so they've asked, they've inquired, they went. They asked, they inquired, they went. And in between, they're weeping, and then they're fasting, and they're weeping, and they're doing offerings. Again, they're told to go. Then Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Gibeah as they had before. The Benjamites came out to meet them and were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that about 30 men fell in the open field and on the roads, the one leading to Bethel and the other leading to Gibeah. While the Benjamites were saying, "We are defeating them as before," the Israelites were saying, "Let's retreat and draw them away from the city to the roads." All the men of Israel moved from their places and took up positions at Baal Tamar. And the Israelite ambush charged out of its place on the west of Gibeah. Then 10,000 of Israel, able young men, made a frontal attack of Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. Oh, that's interesting. So they're so into fighting, they're not even paying attention that they're about to lose. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. Then the Benjamites saw they were defeated. Now the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin, because they relied on the ambush they had set near Gibeah. Those who had been in ambush made a sudden dash into Gibeah, spread out, and put the whole city to the sword. The Israelites had arranged the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and then the Israelites would counterattack. So those fleeing, here's the signal. We're going to have a big smoke signal, and you'll know that the city is defeated. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on Israel, about 30. We already had 30 mentioned earlier. So this is a going back and forth of telling the story. And they said, "We are defeating them as in the first battle." But when the column of smoke began to rise from the city, the Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. Then the Israelites counterattacked, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized that disaster had come on them. So they fled before the Israelites in the direction of the wilderness, but they could not escape the battle. And the Israelites who came out of the towns cut them down there. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them easily and easily overran them in the vicinity of Gibeah on the east. 18,000 Benjamites fell, all of them valiant fighters, as they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. The Israelites cut down 5,000 men along the road. They kept pressing after the Benjamites as far as Giddon and struck down 2,000 more. On that day, 25,000 Benjamite swordsmen fell, all of them valiant fighters. But 600 of them turned and fled into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and where they stayed 4 months. The men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all the towns to the sword, including the animals and everything else they found. All the towns they came across, they set on fire. So, total devastation. They are repaying what had happened. The men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah. Not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. The people went to Bethel, where they sat before God until evening, raising their voices and weeping bitterly. Lord God of Israel, they cried, why has this happened in Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? Early the next day, the people built an altar and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Israelites asked, who from all the tribes of Israel has failed to assemble before the Lord? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah was to be put to death. Now the Israelites grieved for the tribe of Benjamin, their fellow Israelites. Today, one tribe is cut off from Israel, they said. How can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath, but the Lord has, by the Lord, not to give any of our daughters in marriage? Then they asked which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah. They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come up to the camp for the assembly. For when they counted the people, they found that none of the people at Jabesh Gilead were there. So the assembly sent 12,000 men to fight, with instructions to go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including the women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Kill every male and every woman who is not a virgin. They found among the people living in Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. Then the whole assembly sent an offer of peace to the Benjamites at the rock of Rimmon. So the Benjamites returned at that time and were given the women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared, but there were not enough for all of them. The people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. And the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamites survivors must have heirs, they said, so that a tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We cannot give them our daughters as wives, since we Israelites have taken an oath. Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to Benjamites. But look, there is an annual festival to the Lord at Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and south to Lebonah. Wow, this is just getting more and more intrigue, I guess is the word. We're going to do this, but we can't do that. And we need to do this, but we can't do that. And they need this because we don't want that, but we're limited because of what we've already made a commitment to. I mean, this is very interesting. It also shows how important oaths are, that you don't break an oath. And we already looked at Joshua when he made the oath under false pretenses, why he didn't break the oath. Like you lied. So why let that bind you to something because it was a deceptive oath? But it was because it was an oath made to God, and you need to keep an oath made before God. You have made the vow, and it doesn't matter if you were tricked into it. It doesn't matter if the other party doesn't hold to it. You uphold your vows. It's that important and that crucial to demonstrate your truthfulness and who you are. So, yeah, here they're going through all of these kinds of things to try and we've seen that several times where I go, man, this is just, you shouldn't have made the vow. Some of these very true. We've looked at some of the vows that have been made here. They shouldn't have made them. Here maybe is another case. Maybe they shouldn't have made the vow, but they're going to honor the vow because they have made it. So, okay. The people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. And the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the women who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs. Heirs to the land is a very important thing. You need to have an heir so that the land remains part of the people. The Benjamite survivors must have heirs, so the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We cannot give them our daughters. Okay, we already read that part. So, so they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and hide in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to join in the dancing, rush from the vineyards, and each of you seize one of them to be your wife. Then return to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, do us the favor of helping them, because we did not get wives from them during the war. You will not be guilty of breaking your oath because you did not give your daughters to them. Oh my goodness. So we've got a loophole. We're going to tell you when and where to seize daughters by force. We're not giving them. We didn't break our oath, but we're telling you how to get around this problem. So that is what the Benjamites did. While the young women were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt their towns and settled them. At that time, the Israelites left that place and went home to their tribes and clans, each to his own inheritance. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. I think that's really part of the key of what the whole book is about. And here it is, the final statement. Everyone did what they saw fit. Now, we do have at times people inquiring of the Lord. Why didn't they inquire of the Lord? Lord, we made this vow. What should we do? How do we help Benjamin? How do we not have them? They don't seemingly ask that question. They come up with another plan. Often when they're coming up with these plans, they seem outlandish and ridiculous, and I'm sure they made logical sense to them when they were making those plans. But to my ears, I really rather wish they wouldn't have done some of these things. But there's no king, and everyone did what was saw fit. So two statements. I don't know that they have to be related. They're just two statements of fact. There's no king yet, and Israel is going to have a king, and we know that. So there's the foreshadowing. Oh, we're in the time before the kings. We're in the time before the kings. We're in the time after the land is conquested and still being conquested, and everyone did whatever they saw was right. That was it. If they saw it was right, they did it. And that's how this whole thing got started, was people doing what they saw was right. How's it end? People doing what they saw was right. So, all right. So we have finished another book that leads us through Judges. Let's go ahead and do 1 Corinthians 1 and 2. Thanks all for being here through this and lurking and chatting. I know some of that was like, man, if you're blowing up the chat, it was going to be not really good support for any of the actions most of these people were taking, or just kind of, like, why is this in here? And it's really that point of everyone did what they saw was right. That's the point it's making, is that the people were not following God. They're not following God. So when we get down the road and David shows up, and David is a man after God's own heart, it's a stark contrast to some of what's happened before. I think that's part of what's going on there.